But I'll fix that. All right, we'll start over then. Welcome to City Council meeting. Grateful for those of you who have joined us this evening. Look forward to your participation. I would like to acknowledge Councilman Severing is on Zoom with us tonight. He's a little bit under the weather, so he's being cautious and staying home, but he has joined us. Start our meeting tonight with an invocation or thought from Council Member Ekstrom, and then she'll also lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay. Council Member Ekstrom.
Invocation. Dear Heavenly Father, we are so very grateful to be gathered together this evening. We're grateful for the opportunity that we have to live in North Ogden and for its beauties and for the wonderful feeling and community that we have here. We're grateful for the rain and precipitation that we've received and pray that it will continue to come and replenish our water supply. We are so very grateful for all of the freedoms that we are afforded and for all those who have sacrificed to give those to us. Please help us to always be mindful of them. Please help us to be wise stewards over our resources. Please help us to be mindful and cautious and careful and be able to have that inspiration to make wise decisions regarding our city and our community. We're again so grateful for all that we have and ask these things humbly in the name of Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Repeat with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You know what happens if that is always the rule in grade school, we have to say that every day.
Thank you, Councilmember Ekstrom, for that invocation and leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll now enter into our consent agenda this evening. At this time, I would ask any of the council members if they feel they have any potential conflicts of interest to disclose based upon our agenda this evening, if they would now declare those potential conflicts. I don't see any, so we will proceed on with item number 2 on our agenda. This is an action to approve the August 17th, 2021 City Council meeting minutes. Council members, I hope you've had a chance to review those. At this point in time, if you have any corrections or questions, that would be the time. If not, I would look for a motion to approve those minutes, the minutes of August 17th. Councilmember Ekstrom?
Yes. I just noticed that Leanne Lippert's name was printed in there as Leanne Rupert. So I don't know if that matters a lot, but that's a change in last name for a resident that's contributed to me.
We can correct that. I think Joyce is taking notes on that. Any other corrections? Seeing none, then we have a motion to approve the minutes with the previously mentioned correction.
So moved.
So moved by Councilmember Swanson. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Ekstrom. Any further discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, then all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We'll now move on to item number 3, which is a approval of the August 24th, 2021 City Council meeting minutes. Any comments or corrections on those minutes? I don't see any, so do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
So moved by Councilmember Stoker. Do we have a second?
Second.
Have a second by Councilmember Swanson. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We'll proceed now to the active agenda portion of our meeting this evening. We'll seek public comments from those who are with us electronically. Joyce, if you would watch for those to see if anyone has any comments. And also those here, if you'd like to make a comment, if you would come to the podium over here, I would just remind you to please state your name, if you're a resident of North Ogden. And by any means, don't want to be rude, but if you would just watch for 3 minutes, I would appreciate it. So we'll now proceed with public comments.
Sandy Cochran, North Ogden resident. First, I would like to thank Phil Swanson for coming out to Prominence Point last night and looking at the area and listening to our concerns. And we'd like to ask you to help us with the situation. You saw one of the homes that had a 4-foot drop off in the backyard. There's got to be some kind of code that's in violation of. And I have no clue how to look that stuff up, how to find it, but there are a lot of people that had to spend a lot of money to put fences up because of that, and everyone couldn't do it. If you could just help us figure out where we could go with that. Is it breaking a code? Who would we go speak to? Do we file a complaint? We're willing to do the work. We just don't know where to look and what to do. And then I also have a request for Councilman Severing. Can you hear me? Blake?
I can hear you. Yes, Sandy, thank you.
Okay, so there are several homeowners in our development who purchased property and were never ever notified. It wasn't on any of their documentation that there would be a trail running near their property or that there was a public easement because of the creek. That has got to be a violation of some kind of real estate something. I mean, I can't believe not one realtor, nothing was said to any of them at all about this. And I'm wondering if you could help us figure out, we know how to file ethic complaints, but is there a board we can go to? And I'm not asking you to file a complaint on one of your colleagues. I'm just asking you to help us figure out who we call, where do we go, what form do we fill out, because that should never have happened. They should not be in the position they're in right now, that they had no clue there was a public easement running along the side of their property.
I will do some.
Is that something you could help us with?
You better believe it, Sandy. I'll do some research and let you know.
Great, thank you very much. That's all I have.
And
Thank you.
Councilman Barker, if you could get one of the inspectors out there from Public Works or Planning to look at the issue there to see if there's a violation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Kent Bell, and I live at 2739 North, 450 East. And we're here to discuss the item number 6, the action and/or action to consider an ordinance to adjust the standards for accessory buildings. Okay, may I approach the council with some pictures to view and also some color samples? Okay, we are appealing for a variance in the design standard for outside materials and accessory buildings. We are proposing to have a 18 by 20 foot Clary building built in the southwest corner of our lot as stated in the permit application. Okay, the color, there was some discrepancy on whether we could put this up because of the material it was made out of and some other things on the code, so I wanted to go over those with you. Okay, the colors that we have chosen are charcoal gray on the roof, and light gray on the walls, and white trim around the doors and windows to match our house. The roof will be changed to a 412 pitch to meet code. It was originally a 312, but that didn't meet code, so we're having that changed to a 412. And there will be a 12-inch eave overhang all the way around the building as per code. It's a Clary building, and Clary buildings have been in business for 45 years, and they are made of 29 gauge industrial quality full hard steel, and it has a lifetime color integrity warning on the side walls and roof against fading and oxidization. They are a quality building and an attractive building. This building is not going to be for business, but for storage of yard equipment. And a 6-foot white vinyl fence is in the process of being installed around the yard perimeter. Non-metal materials such as hardy board, smart board, and even aluminum siding materials do not hold paint and retain their color as long and it would hold its value better and look better in the long run made out of this material than it would have with hardy board or any other kind of material. So I would like to thank the council for hearing us at this time and my appeal.
Okay, Mr. Bell, if you would get with Mr. Hess, who's the director. Corlin?
I also have some pictures for you. Like you're at school. I'm Corey Lynn Hightolla from North Ogden, Village of Prominence, your favorite place. So these pictures are my backyard. We're wanting to put a fence in. I was told that we have an easement that Sandy addressed that we weren't aware of. And also that we were in a floodplain that we weren't aware of. And I was told that if we could get the Army Corps of Engineers to clear it, that we could put the fence in. So I finally got a hold of them today, and Nicole said that basically, if it's not in the water that we're dealing with anything, they don't have a problem. So I called Scott, and he's done a lot for me today, and he contacted the city attorney. And the city attorney said, well, there's still the easement there, so we maybe give you 10 more feet on either side. So then he called Nicole at the Corps of Engineers and found out that we may have to do a revision.
A study.
A study. So I've sent her these pictures and some videos. So my problem is they're out there to do the fence. If we don't do it all, the posts are gonna be off. And so it'll look wonky if eventually we get this approved to go through. So on the photos, photo 1 is looking at the creek. So our lot looks towards 1900 north, our backyard. So this is looking west to the neighbors. And our property actually goes across the creek. So in 2, you can kind of see, these are not the best pictures. Let's see, one might show you the posts better. 7 and 8 actually show you the posts that are marked for our property lines, which are across the creek onto the other side. That's the north side in 7, no, I lied, that's the west connection on 7, and the north connection on picture 8. Also, picture 6 shows you a bigger version of that one on 8. So it shows you where the tree line is, and you can kind of see the string that's lying there for where the fence will go on the north side. That's where we want to put a picket, so it's semi-private, because we like that view back there. You've got that HOA for Roy Lance Farms. HOA is behind us. And on picture 1, it shows you where we've kind of gotten, well, they came in to put in the rest of our yard. So at this point, we just have gravel, dirt, and then top soil on there until we can get the fence in, and then they'll move our sprinkler system and put the rest of the sod in. In picture 2, that just kind of shows you looking, if you can see those trees on picture 2, the far 2 trees are that north side. And then in picture 3, it kind of gives you a straight on view from my back patio looking to the creek. So the tree is pretty much our line. We've got 11 feet is what we're dealing with of creek that's in our property. So we have 11 feet of the creek. It goes across the creek. So I don't know if the easement, you have what, 10-foot easement. I don't know how much of that you're gonna get that's land, because my property is probably, I didn't have a measurement on that, 8 feet at least of creek. So what I would like to possibly see if we could do is put the fence in while I've got them there, so that the posts will line up. And if and when the trail system has to go in, we'll remove the panels that we have to remove. But to try and come back after the fact, which who knows when that will be, because we all know how fast the Corps of Engineers work and everything else on this, it's gonna be a while. I would hate to have our property, we have a freeway there anyway. People cut in and out of our yard. And it's really frustrating when you're sitting out there trying to enjoy it and you've got people walking through. I've been in my bathroom and people walk by my window. It's not cool. So we want to be able to have our privacy back there. Plus we're going to be getting a swim spa. I don't want to be out there exercising and have people come wandering through our yard. So I don't know if the city would be willing to let us go ahead, since we've got this rolling. We didn't find out until the day before it was supposed to start that there was going to be an issue. And then we've been trying to rush through to try and get that corrected as quickly as possible. And so now we're down to the wire and I don't know what to do. I'd just like to have our privacy.
Yeah, let us, I understand that, as you know from our previous discussion,
Yes.
there's a little bit bigger issue regarding the trail that comes
Yes.
along the 3 lots. So I think we have to address the whole thing, but let me get with Scott and John and see if we can do that with some type of agreement acknowledging that, you know, the trail may come through there and that,
If and when that does, we will
yeah.
comply
Let us
with
see,
it.
let us see what we can do. We'll discuss that. And I appreciate your request.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you for coming. Joyce, do we have any comments on Zoom or anything?
John is actually watching that.
Okay, John, can you hear us?
There are no comments at this time.
All right. Any other comments from those who are here this evening? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to item number 5 on our agenda. Scott Hess, our planning director, will lead this discussion. And it's in regards to considering an ordinance to clarify the language regarding fences construction in the Clearview Triangle on corner lots. So Scott?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So we have before you today zoning text amendment 2021-05. This was heard by the Planning Commission last Wednesday. I hope that you received the minutes today. That was a rush to get those to you. We also have Commissioner Mason here in attendance from the Planning Commission who can help out with the discussion and answer any questions as needed. So this is a legislative item request. Started with a property owner who wanted to install an open style fencing on a corner triangle of property that was previously approved by the city council to do a bit of an encroachment essentially, or be located right on the edge of some public right of way at 150 East and Pleasant View Drive. When the fence permit came in itself, it was noted that there's a 40-foot by 40-foot triangle on the corner of properties where you can't have anything taller than 2 feet, and that includes fencing. So essentially it disallows fencing within the Clearview Triangle. Staff was requested to look at this ordinance, presented to the Planning Commission, an ordinance change that would have allowed a fence up to 3.5 feet high that is 50% transparent in the corner triangle. Planning Commission considered that and looked at some different fencing standards and actually leaned back on some information that they had received with the previous planning director when they were looking at fences on top of retaining walls, where he went around the city and showed them this is 50% transparent and 75% and 80%. And then also talked about fencing on existing corners, whether it was legal non-conforming or newly installed fences that have created some visibility issues and what those look like. Staff's example of one of these fences is 850 East at 2600 North. This is a detention basin that's also the dog park on the west side as you look south onto 2600, and then on the, on the east side, and then on the west side of that property, there's another property owner with a 4-foot tall chain link fence that is sort of overgrown with some bushes, but long-standing, has been there. Spoke with the Clinton Police Chief, and there have been incidents there, but no traffic incidents as they relate to, I was unable to see the driver or somebody coming because of the fencing in the corner triangle. Ultimately, after looking at the code, discussing with the Planning Commission, there was a recommended change to the ordinance. So at the end of the staff report, you have a draft ordinance with the corrected language, and that would be that fences in the corner of Clearview Triangle shall not exceed 3.5 feet tall, shall be at least 75% transparent, and shall not be chain link. So the chain link call out was specifically because that type of fencing seems to be easier for vines and weeds and other things to grow up, creating a visibility hazard that may just become a code enforcement nightmare in the future of trying to get people to cut those weeds down or make sure that you actually retain the 75+% transparency. So staff has prepared that ordinance with the corrected language for your consideration tonight and is happy to answer any questions.
Councilman Swanson.
Scott, looking at the proposed drafted language in number 1, it says shall not exceed 3.5 feet and must be 50% transparent.
Yeah, so the staff report is still the Planning Commission staff report because we had a Wednesday night meeting and then got it sent to you. So if you go to page 37 of your report, you'll get to the draft ordinance itself. And the draft ordinance has the corrected language. So thank you for pointing that out.
So we are looking at 75% transparency.
Yeah, the Planning Commission's recommendation was 75 to add to this was to go to move from 50 to 75% transparent, and then
not change.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Councilmember Ekstrom?
Thank you, Scott. We had talked about extending the site triangles at one point. Is this included in that, or is this just about the fences?
Yeah, this is as the site triangle is drawn today. The new site triangle becomes on the stop sign. So in this case, you would have two triangles, one that's 30 feet long by 100 feet long, and then another one, same thing, 30 foot by 100 foot, and it becomes the convergence of those two triangles. In some cases, it's more restrictive. In some cases, it's less. It kind of depends on the geometry of the lot. But those public works standards have not been codified yet. So we have a draft version of that, but today it's the 40 by 40 at the back of property line. So when that change comes, the change in the code would be in section 2, where it talks about a 40-foot triangular area specified in this subsection. We would make it the 30 by 100 converging triangle subsection as related to, but the fencing would still stand and be permissive.
Okay, so we're not going to have a problem with allowing a fence as this is written when we change, if we change the side triangle size.
The ultimate change will come where that 6 foot drops to 3.5 feet. Between the two triangles, when you overlay them on a lot, it may change 10 feet where that fence moved heights, but ultimately the intent of the ordinance and what it does would not change.
Okay, that sounds good. I'm thinking of another fence that I see really often that does obscure my view, which is at the corner of 3100 and 1050. You know, it's on the north side. And I stop at the stop sign, but then I really have to creep out. So with this, and I, of course, haven't gotten out and measured it and seen if they're compliant or not, but would this have them change that to at least 75% transparent?
We can't go backwards. So if it's a legal non-conforming fence that exists, the chain link in the Clearview Triangle, if it legally existed, we haven't taken action on it prior to a certain date, it's unlikely we'd be able to make them change it.
Yeah, this is a solid vinyl fence that's fairly tall. So yeah, I guess I just need to be careful.
And we mentioned
Go down
that
road really fast.
these fences, they can be an issue in hills. 3.5 feet tall is 3.5 feet relative. So when you're at a stop bar at an uphill stop sign and you're downhill of it, 3.5 feet tall could be 5 feet tall. So it's there's some trade-offs there for sure.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Any other questions from council members? Councilmember Severing, you have a question?
No questions, Mayor.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, staff, for putting your recommendation together. Any further questions? This is kind of a unique situation. The resident that requested this corner lot was created because of a development. Previous to that, it wasn't a problem. So I think this makes sense under the circumstances, and with the recommendation of the Planning Commission, I would propose that we seek a motion to approve ordinance number 2021-31. Do we have a motion to approve this ordinance?
Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance 2021-31, clarifying the language regarding fences within corner triangles.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilmember Ekstrom. Do we have a second?
I second that, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Severing. Any further discussions or questions? This being an ordinance, I'll request a roll call vote. Let's start with you, Councilmember Severing.
Yes.
Councilmember Barker.
Yes.
Councilmember Ekstrom.
Yes.
Councilmember Stoker.
Yes.
Councilmember Swanson.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. We'll move on now to item 6 on our agenda. Brandon Bell, our associate planner, will lead this discussion. And it's a discussion in regards to amending the ordinance for standards regarding accessory buildings. Brandon?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Just a couple notes before I begin my comments. There's a slightly updated version of the ordinance, which John should have online pulled up. And I'll go over the couple of changes that were made to that ordinance from the version that was given in your packet. This is a similar, this ordinance, or this item was processed on a similar time frame as the last item, and it was just considered last week at Planning Commission. So we didn't have time to update the ordinance prior to submitting the materials for the packet. So regarding accessory buildings, there have been a number of changes regarding the ordinance in the last few years. So as staff considered this, we kind of felt like it'd be good to just not necessarily recommend one way or the other these changes, but provide sort of the types of issues that have come up as these changes have been considered over the last 5 or 6 years, and the sort of considerations and issues that we think the council should think about as they consider this ordinance. The city has struck over the last few years, we think, a relatively good balance regarding accessory buildings and ordinances that pertain to them between the property rights of those who'd like to build an accessory building and the rights of neighboring property owners who may be impacted by such buildings. However, it is worth noting that our current ordinance is somewhat more detailed than other cities' ordinances that we surveyed as we reviewed those. As staff reviewed those other ordinances, they generally don't have as many restrictions on the size of accessory buildings in similar zones, but on the other hand, these ordinances may also not consider the impact of accessory buildings on neighboring property owners sufficiently. In staff's role in North Ogden City, we received and have received concerns and complaints expressed from both property owners with accessory buildings who have felt like they haven't been able to build a big enough building or have had other concerns. But we've also received them from neighbors as well who have had concerns about the impact. So staff's of the opinion that there's not necessarily one perfect standard, but that there's a reasonable range of solutions that can be arrived at based on principles that seek to balance and maintain the rights of all affected parties. Staff believes that the valid interests of neighbors on this topic revolve around the issues of the height of the building, especially in relation to the distance of that height from the property line, the excessive blocking of light coming onto a neighbor's property, and an excessive heat transmission from a building on a neighbor's property. The concerns regarding the property owner who would like to build an accessory building, obviously most typically revolve around the size of that building and how big of a building they're able to build on their property, as well as issues regarding designs and materials. The concerns about designs and materials of accessory buildings were addressed in a change that occurred in, I believe, April of 2020, and those are not being considered in this potential ordinance amendments that's on the table tonight. Those standards regarding design and materials do require similar materials and design to be used as the home or the main dwelling. It also may be worth considering that we have 3 types of buildings that can go on a lot. There's the main dwelling, which most people refer to as a home, an accessory dwelling unit, and then accessory buildings. There's 3 different categories. The other 2 types of buildings can go in the R1 zones 20 feet from the property line. And with the main dwelling, the main dwelling can be up to 35 feet in height. Typically that 35 feet is only approached at the peak of the roof. The ordinance sort of anticipates that everyone's going to have a peaked roof, but technically you could have a box-shaped home that was 35 feet tall, 20 feet from the rear property line. Similarly, but not quite as severe, is our accessory dwelling units, which can be 25 feet tall, 20 feet from the rear property line, and 8 to 10 or 12 feet from the side property line, which is the same as homes, depending on which R1 zone that you're in. And so both of these other 2 types of buildings can be a little bit closer to the property line, depending on what property line you're measuring from. And so staff's opinion is that these 3 different types of buildings should actually have a similar standard. The current height limit for an accessory dwelling unit is 25 feet, and the current height limit for an accessory building, which is a building that's separate from the home but you don't live in, is 20 feet. And so this ordinance would bring the standards relatively closer to conformity. And the proposed ordinance amendment, the main thing that it accomplishes is with regards to setbacks, is it takes a ratio and smooths out our existing standards. So currently we have 3 categories of height ranges, and if you're in each category, then you have a specific setback. And what staff has proposed with this potential ordinance amendment is that we essentially smooth that out. I can show that to you right here. So essentially, if this was a 10-foot building, then you have to be 3 feet from the property line. The height's indicated here and the setbacks here from the rear property line. What our current ordinance has is 3 categories that have a really large step. And for each category, you go 5 or so feet more. What we're proposing essentially is that you just turn this into a 45-degree angle line, but the trade-off or the principle inherent is for each foot that you go up, you also in height at the highest point of the roof, you also have to add an additional foot of setback. And so if you start at 10 feet and you're 3, then for 11, you're 4, 12, you're 5, et cetera, up to 25, which would end up at 18 feet from the property line. So that proposed adjustment would smooth out the setback requirements and allow a finer grain of buildings to be built, as opposed to some 3 bigger chunks that tend to put buildings a little bit further away sometimes. There's still an ordinance, there's still a provision in the ordinance that requires the buildings be limited to 25% of the rear yard. We feel that that's a proper relationship to tie it to. Ecologically, the rear yards often serve as a lot of filtration of groundwater that's percolates into the ground, and so we don't think that should be covered entirely with a building, and there should be. And then also, we think preserving some degree of an open fill is an important purpose of backyards. The other adjustments to the ordinance, the next one involves decoupling the height of the building from of an accessory building that's permitted from the roof height of the main dwelling. There's a formula that provides a custom custom height limit based on the height of the main building. And staff is proposing that it just makes things too complex. And what we're suggesting is that that height be, if you move it to 25 feet is one possibility, but then the height is also, the maximum permitted would be 25 feet, but that the one-to-one relationship would determine, just say, you can have it higher if you wanted, not higher than 25, but you can go, say, taller than 10 up to 25, but every foot you go up, you have to go 1 foot back again. And so we're just saying that there has to maintain a relationship between height and setback. The other, there's another formula that's currently in the ordinance, which we're recommending be simplified as well. It's also tied to the size of the home. And what staff is suggesting is that we just go, and this was also by the recommendation of the Planning Commission, that we go to a flat number to keep it more simple. Staff had originally proposed 1,250 square feet. That was based on that it was an increment smaller than what's allowed in the RE20, which is an agricultural zone. And so we just said, 1,250 is reasonable. Planning Commission felt that it should be tied to the size of the lot and not so much the zone. And so what they propose, and that's reflected in the current ordinance that's not in your packet, has the adjustments should be in the ordinance on the screen, is 1,500 square feet for lots that are less than an acre. And so just a little bit larger than that 1,250, and then 2,500 for lots that are an acre or greater. And so the Planning Commission we have a member here, if you'd like to make a comment in a bit, he's welcome to. But their point was that it should be tied to the size of the lot, because even if you're in an R1 zone, but you have an acre lot, it's not going to have as big of an impact on your neighbor or cover as much of your rear yard if you have that large of a lot. Additionally, tying to the lot does is that it's not, there's very few lots that are going to be over an acre in R1 zones. I would guess that it's probably less than 1%. But they felt that was an important distinction, so that to preserve help look out for the interests of the property owners preserving or proposing accessory buildings on their property. So the attached ordinance amendment brings the code closer to uniformity for different types of buildings, and allowing roughly similar standards for any building, whether it's accessory dwelling units, accessory buildings, or single-family homes regarding distance from the rear property line. The other thing to consider, and this is something that the council can obviously debate, is currently the limit on accessory buildings is 20 feet. This ordinance, if adopted, would raise it to 25 feet. Staff isn't saying that's right or wrong, but we want to bring it to your attention to let you decide if you feel like that change is appropriate and fitting for the R1 zones. The intent behind most of these potential adjustments is to simplify the ordinance, and if a height increase is permitted for accessory buildings, to ensure that increase in height takes into consideration balances and meets the interests of both the property owners proposing accessory buildings and the neighboring property owners as well. I think that, let me just look over the ordinance and see if I've covered all of the changes. Oh, okay. So there is an ordinance there is a provision in the current ordinance that ties it to, that ties the setback and where the location that's permitted for an accessory building to make sure that it's 60 feet. An accessory building needs to be 60 feet from a dwelling on an adjoining lot. Staff's opinion is that tying it to the conditions on an external piece of property is not, it's not easy, and it's probably not how you should do it. It should be tied to something that's determined by the lot itself. And so you'd still have significant amount of distance between between homes on adjoining lots, because at least at the rear property line, you're going to have for a 25-foot building, 18 to the rear property line, and then you're going to have at least an additional 20 feet to the next home on a adjoining lot, typically.
Brandon, is the current for a residential home, is the setback 20 feet from the property line in the rear for a residence?
For home, a main dwelling, yes, it's 20 feet.
And so what's the rationale of letting a accessory building unit be closer than a residence?
I don't know what the purpose of it is. I can guess what it is, but I didn't craft it originally. But accessory buildings typically are not going to be producing as much noise as others. That is an interest of, the issue of noise is an interest of obviously neighboring property owners. That's not addressed in this ordinance. The reason being because we have a noise ordinance already in the city, and so we felt like that would handle it. But typically, so a lot of accessory buildings are going to be a tough shed that's going to be 8 by 10 or something around there, maybe 8 to 10 feet tall. And so we don't feel that a building of that size should have to be 20 feet from the property line. But what we're saying essentially with this standard is that as it gets closer in scale and size as a home, that the setback should also come closer to that.
So if I build a 2,500 square foot accessory building, and I want to hold a dance in it and play music, I'm 18 feet from the neighbor versus my home has to be 20.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me.
Okay.
I'd had a chance to attend the Planning Commission meeting, and it was very well thought through. In fact, Commissioner Mason is here with us tonight, and I must say that when he came up with the 2,500 foot maximum, that there was smoke coming out of his ears. He calculated that so deeply.
I'm prepared to speak to that tonight.
Yes. 25 feet, I don't think that's a problem from my perspective. you know, if a home can be 35 feet. I did mention the 2,500 square feet I thought was a little bit large, but we'll hear from Commissioner Mason. But first, council, do we have any questions for Brandon while he's with us?
So my understanding, Brandon, is that with the proposed ordinance, either Brandon, I figured that out. An accessory dwelling unit at 25 feet tall can be 20 feet from the property line. An accessory building, same size, same construction, but not used as a dwelling unit, has to be 25 feet. 10 feet for the first, 3 feet for the first, no, it would be 18.
18 max. Yeah, that's my question.
My math was bad. Yeah, good thing we had that account.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. I brought my calculator
With
just in
that,
case.
well, it's kind of the same question. Then it doesn't make sense to just make it at 20 feet.
You can do it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's what staff's position is. We were trying to find a simple adjustment to the current formula, and that 1-to-1 came up with 18. You know, I will say that I don't recall receiving a complaint about an accessory building due to noise. Of all the complaints that we've gotten, and so sorry, I'm tying your question to noise. So the main thing that we've seen is that that they would have the complaints that we've gotten have dealt with the size, the scale, and the color or materials of them. Now, remember based on our current ordinance, the 25 feet, even though it's 18 feet from the property line, at 35 feet home, at 20 feet back, this may be 22 or 24 feet at the tip of the wall, and this would then be the 35 feet. And so at a scale at 25 feet for an accessory building, it's a little bit closer, but our current ordinance requires a 412 roof pitch. And so even though it's a couple feet closer, the height at the actual setback is going to be somewhere close between 16 to 20 feet, something around there.
So, but Brandon, if somebody has a home that's 25 feet tall, they still have to be 20 foot from the back property line.
Right.
Or if it's 10 feet tall or it's 20 feet tall, our ordinance requires a 20-foot setback.
That's true.
So I'm just a little bit confused how we got 18 for this type of building, but we have our fire marshal here with us who has a comment. Councilmember Barker.
I'm thinking I understand where it's coming from, and it makes sense to me. At 3 feet, you can build a 10-foot building. If we want to say at 25 feet, you got to be 20 feet in. What about everything in between? We've got our ordinance of just build a 10-foot building at 3 feet. This way, it's just saying for every foot in, you get to go a foot taller.
So my question is though, if I want to build a house 20 feet, can I be 15 feet from the property line?
No.
Why?
Because you're not going to build a 10-foot house at 3 feet in.
No, I'm talking about a 20-foot house.
Right. There's not a perfect exact answer to your question. I understand the question. What we were trying to do is come up with a formula that
yeah, and you did a good job. I understand that. It just seems inconsistent to me that you can build an accessory building closer than you can a home, even if it's the same height.
Sheds and homes are not the same
on there.
Noise-wise.
The other thing I would like to mention for the council on discussion is we had a citizen come tonight that's also asking us to consider, the building materials that can be used. And I don't know the council's appetite to address that issue. But if we're going to amend the ordinance, we probably ought to chat. But before I get Brandon Mason up here, I want to see if there's any other questions for Brandon Bell.
Right.
Councilmember Ekstrom?
Yeah, I'm just wondering why if we say it can't be more than 25% of the lot size, right? It can't cover up more than 25%. Why do we even have a maximum. Like, you can build it as big as you want, just don't cover more than 25% of your yard. So that way it's like, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different question, but I see Brandon Bell about ready to jump out of his seat, so he might have a thought on that one.
Do you want me to answer that, or do you want Commissioner Mason? I'm
Either
happy
one,
to-
I'm just postulating.
Well, so, what this ordinance is doing is actually, there used to be 3 that address the sides, or at least there were 2 different standards. This is removing a restriction and just making that flat. And so, in the current version of the ordinance, we're changing to a flat standard to make it more simple. We're not proposing something new, we're just simplifying what existed, is one way of saying it. I do think that there's value because 25% is relative to the lot size, right? And so you're saying the lesser of those 2 is what you're able to build. And because you could have, some different lot sizes, the lesser of the 2 is going to come into play, and that's going to be different to maintain that openness in the rear yard. So in other words, if you have a lot that's less than, 1,500, if you had a lot that was smaller, the building then has to get smaller to make sure that 25% of the lot, or 75% of the rear yard is preserved. Go ahead.
Councilwoman Ekstrom, if we didn't have that maximum, we recently had a resident come in on a 3.5 acre lot.
What was that, the Carney?
Yeah. So if we take that 3.5 acres and we limit the building size to 25% of the square footage of the lot, they can have a 37,000 square foot accessory building.
Okay, and we just don't want one that big.
Well, think about 37,000 square feet. I mean, the largest home we have up on the hill is just right at 18,000 square feet. So if we have twice that as an accessory building,
My mom always said she wanted a little house in a big barn.
well, that's
But I don't know that anybody actually would. I'm just wondering,
somebody will.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody will, but if they want to.
I mentioned
Airplane.
to the planning commission, we've been looking at trying to do an accessory dwelling unit in the county. And their maximum is 1,500 square feet, no matter how big the lot is. And it's limited to 50% of the total square footage of your home. But I trust that our planning commission and our planning staff have done their homework and found that this isn't out of line with the surrounding areas that we abut. So, any questions? I'm afraid that Brandon Bell's going to have a heart attack back here if we don't get him up
You
here.
probably will, but Brandon Mason might.
I mean, Brandon Mason, yeah, if we don't get him up here. Any other questions, Brandon Bell? Okay, Brandon Mason from the Planning Commission, Commissioner Mason.
Okay, I'm Brandon Mason. I'm on the Planning Commission. I'm a resident of North Ogden. I believe one of the primary functions of the Planning Commission is to save you guys time. So we debated this in the fence issue at length on our last meeting. So I came down tonight to defend the Planning Commission's decision. I was the one that made the recommendation the way it's worded. And so I can only give you my interpretation of things. I'll try to express the Planning Commission as a whole's sentiment. The reason I put when I made the motion, the reason I put the limitation in the size, Commissioner Ekstrom, which I didn't like, I ended up tagging in there that it had to be 1,500 square feet maximum on under an acre, and over an acre you could be up to 2,500. I hate having literals in our ordinances to begin with, meaning, we've had applications come to us for subdivision lengths, or I'm sorry, cul-de-sac lengths, and it's been 500 feet, and then it's 750 feet, and then somebody's always going to just want to move that stick, and it's their legal right to do that. And at the end of the day, a number is a number. So what is 1,250? There's probably no science that went into it. I think someone just grabbed a number and stuck it down there. So I wanted to have an ordinance that didn't limit that at all. And what we have is a set of ordinances that make a Venn diagram out of our building limitations, meaning there's setbacks and there's roof pitches and the smoothing of the roof like we're talking about here. And what we get is all these parameters, and what we're left to be able to build is where they all overlap. And I thought that was limiting enough that we didn't need a 1,250-foot definition at all. And I was angling towards that. However, there was discussion that the contrary, like Councilman Swanson was saying, that, well, then we could get this monster building. And my rebuttal to that was, okay, so then we get, what is so offensive about a monster building if it fits everything else, if it doesn't take up more than 25% of the total lot, and it's set back, and to the mayor's point, well, why can't a house be that close? Well, we're not talking the housing ordinance here, or we're talking about accessory dwellings, and that was the application that was in front of us. So I can't fix what may be wrong with the standard, what would you even call that, the dwelling setback, but this is something that we could fix. So I'm strongly of the opinion that that we debated this, and I'd love, if you guys want to beat this up again tonight, I'd love to be part of your discussion, because we looked at all angles. We went till the late hours of the night discussing this, and we unanimously decided that this was the way to go. Again, it's not everything I wanted, but that's what this world is, a set of give and take. So I did throw in the literal limitations, the 1,500 square feet and 2,500 square feet, just to make something and to kind of make the rest of the planning commission feel better.
Maybe you explain to us how you arrived at that 2,500 square feet.
It was real scientific. I licked my finger, I stuck it up in the wind, and the first number that came to my head, I got 2,500 square feet. Because where
that was true.
Come from? Really. I don't want to have a literal definition anywhere. Why is a subdivision, why can a cul-de-sac only be 750 square feet? Now, there's some science tied to it with the fire marshal and stuff, but when there is, that's great. But when we're just setting numbers to set a number with what we like, there's probably not a lot of thought into that. And that's my thing. So I would love to see this ordinance adopted, because and remember, this is only for the R1 zones. This does not affect our RE zones. Now, that's again something that I think we ought to look at. But when we took a look at it, what we found is we have a one-size-fits-all ordinance with 1,250 square feet that meets 90% of the definition of our RE zones, meaning that they're quarter-acre lots or whatever. And yeah, we don't want to see a 2,000 square foot building in a quarter-acre lot. But there are these lots out there that have 3.5 acres, that have 2.5 acres, and why shouldn't they have an accessory dwelling unit that they love? The best one I've ever been in is a guy out in Far West who has a home. It's a nice home. He's got a great big plot of land, and he has a full court basketball court. And I used to play basketball there and really enjoy it. You have to have, if you want to shoot 3-pointers effectively and as well as I do, then you're going to have 25 feet for that kind of stuff. And so, if somebody has the room for it, I'd just love to see us have an ordinance that meets it, and that's all I'll say.
Commissioner, I thought that in the discussion we did in the ordinance put this across all zones in the city, because I think you're right. It shouldn't just apply to
what the proposal said was if legally applicable. But what we had as a public hearing for the R1 zones, and we would love to have seen that applied across the board.
And I think that makes sense. And so are we going to end up amending this ordinance again, or do we just wait to amend it? Because I think it makes a lot of sense what Commissioner Mason is saying now. I would take one exception that, perhaps this ordinance is wrong and not the housing ordinance at 20 feet.
Well, could be.
So
absolutely. Again, this is just, there's no answers in this world.
Any other questions for Commissioner Mason? Any questions for?
So would you be okay if we took it out? We'll take out that 1,500 and just had it to 25%?
Well, again, I'm trying to represent two entities here, me as a resident and the planning commission.
Okay, so the rest of the planning commission really liked having a limit?
Brandon Mason thinks that you should remove the literal limitations altogether, okay? The planning commission, however, was uncomfortable without having some kind of a stopgap, okay? So we don't get a 37,000 square foot building. And so we put that in there. In all practicality, it's going to meet most people's needs. I think anytime you have a literal value, you're going to end up just moving that stake around as people see fit. So Brandon Mason thinks you should. The planning commission proposed what the planning commission proposed, and I was the one that proposed it because I thought that's what was going to pass.
Unanimously, I believe.
It was a unanimous decision, yeah.
To do that. Yeah. Any other questions for Commissioner Mason while he's here? Councilman Barker?
This isn't really a question, it's more of if you start to build a bigger building than 2,500 square feet with a 412 pitch roof, how big are your walls gonna be once you start to get out far?
I'm not that good at math to be able to do that for you.
You won't be able to do it, and so then you'll be coming back with people wanting to go taller because now they want a 20-foot wall with their roof.
Well-
And so I think, I'm of the opinion 2,500 is a good number. You start making them too big, I mean, you can drive up and look at my big barn I have up on Fruitland Drive. It's 100 feet by 40 feet, so about a 4,000 square foot building, and look at the roof on that. And that's what we're gonna get into if we start saying you can do 25% of your backyard.
Yeah, I'm definitely not a fan of shifting our ordinances around, especially to apply for onesie, twosie, applications that come in. We have to have a stick in the mud, and it has to be our definition. But in this case, I felt like we have enough ordinances that limited enough that removing that literal would have been fine. And the rest of the ordinance as written, I think was brilliant. And, the smoothing of the roof lines didn't get enough discussion here, but to me, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner
Thank you.
Mason. Council, any other discussion? I don't want to eliminate the request from the citizen tonight in regards to the building materials. I one that frankly doesn't like to keep amending ordinance after ordinance after ordinance. I think we've got two issues. One is, I do believe, as recommended by the Planning Commission, this should apply to all zones in the city. I would like to see that further discussed. And then what's your appetite in regards to the building materials while we're amending ordinances? Councilmember Barker?
I'll start off. As long as the color scheme matches the house, I don't think it should matter what kind of materials you use. Metal does last longer than hardy board, stucco, siding, so it'll hold up better. So I'd give the opinion that we just table this all until we can address the exterior.
Scott, did you have a comment you wanted to make?
Yeah, just briefly. So this applies to R15 through R1 12.5, and then at RE20 you have a slightly different interpretation, which is kind of chunks of size of land and buildings up to a certain size, up to 3,000 square feet. So in our agricultural areas, if you have 5 acres or more, you can build a 3,000 square foot building. And then to complicate it further, our hillside protection zones, HP1 being essentially a hillside version of R110, has HP1 and HP2 have their own standards altogether, which is 25% lot coverage, 25% of the main floor area of your home limited to 15 feet tall. And I'd have to go back through the decision-making process for that hillside protection zone. It could be, we don't want to see really tall accessory structures up there. We don't want to see really large accessory structures up there. But just so you know, in the short time I've been here, we've had one homeowner who applied for a 3,500 square foot building and a 700 square foot building in addition to the main home. And the decision was to connect the large one to the house. Once you connect it to the house, it just becomes a function of the whole house. So to say apply to all zones, I just would like the clarity, do we want to unwind the provisions in RE20? Or do we want to increase the ability in the HP zones? Because it's like kind of the intersection of those two things.
I think Eric gave an example of several people up in the HP zone that have 3 lots.
Mm-hmm.
And they might like a larger accessory building than we're allowing. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying, have we done our homework enough to amend this ordinance? I know there's nothing once and for all, but if we know there's some issues that have to be addressed, whether it's the what constitutes the building materials. I know that was most of the I think complaints we got is about metal buildings that were too high and too close. So our obligation is to try to protect the rights of property owners, but also make sure that we're being fair and equitable to those who surround that piece of property. So that's my only question. Do we amend this now, or do we wait till we get everything in place?
I just have one more question, and it would be for John Call, and that's, land use zoning codes follow a different approval pathway in the state code than our standard ordinances do. They're outside of Title 11 and 12. So we posted rather a public hearing to consider accessory standards in the R1 zones, and I just would confirm with him whether that permits the council to extend that to other areas outside of what we have.
Well, I think we'd have to table it and go back to the proper procedure, but more than happy to hear from John.
You're right, Mayor. We would need to table it and hold another public hearing with the Planning Commission.
All right, council, any other thoughts? Commissioner Mason, you want to come back up to the podium, please?
So we debated the same issue. Should this be tabled and should the other ordinances be wrapped in? At the end of the day, we decided to move forward with this one because there was a pending application. And just to give that citizen their kind of due process, we decided not to table. Now, you certainly could, and you can certainly take a holistic approach to this, and I would support that. But for the pending application, we decided to kind of move this through. And I guess I would encourage you to give it that same consideration, because there's nothing prohibiting us from going back and looking at the other ordinances down the road. If this is a good idea, I encourage you to adopt it. And thank you.
Well, I would say that we don't push ordinances through based upon individual citizen requests. I appreciate the comment that we do try to accommodate, but we think we go through the proper process and do them correctly. Any other questions? Councilmember Swanson, was that a raise your hand type deal? I don't know if you were, what you were doing there. Let's hear from Councilmember Swanson.
I'll throw something at you next time. I'm okay with moving forward with what we have, mainly not because we have a pending application, but because I can see that the complexities of the HP zones and the RE zones, that's going to take some work to get that figured out. That's not something that's going to happen quickly. And I think this is a good starting point for us. So I'm okay with moving forward with the R1 zones, knowing that we've got additional complexity that we're going to have to work through in the HP, the hillside protection zones and the RE agriculture zone, because of, like you mentioned, Scott, the 3,000 square foot in the REs, and the hillsides. That's a whole different. I appreciate the desire to have everything wrapped up in one. I just don't think we can do that with this one, and I'm okay to move forward with it. Appreciate the efforts of the Planning Commission. I know they spent a lot of time on this one.
Okay, let's address the issue then of composition of the building materials while we're at it. That applies to everything.
Yeah, I'm with Ryan. I think we can add it too. I think building materials are changing, and it might have been maybe when this ordinance was written, metal didn't look very good, and the metals that were available, but construction materials are just, technology around them is just getting better and better. And so what Mr. Bell wants to do, it looks like really nice.
If I can say something. In one of the pictures that I handed out, it shows our location of the building that we want to put in our backyard. And if you look to the south, there's a red Clary barn right there that's in the back of used to be Trace Maw's house, and now they're putting up for sale. But that's a Clary barn that's been there a long time, and it still looks good. It hasn't oxidized or hasn't, faded. It's good material, and also the Baptist church behind us has a metal building in their backyard there that they store things in. And our lot is big enough that I don't think it's going to impact the neighbors at all, and it'll be enclosed in a fence, so, thank you.
Basically, with all these changes, we're back to where we were before we passed the ordinance in April of 2020, pretty much.
Close.
Be close. Councilman Swanson?
My only concern with metal, I look at the Cleary buildings, I think they're quite nice. They can certainly look really nice. My only concern is the gauge of the material, the steel that's being used. I mean, you look at a Harbor Freight metal building versus a Cleary metal building, they are completely different. Right, the gauge of the metal is different. The durability is quite different. Scott, do you think we ought to have something along those lines? Because I think the Cleary buildings and that type of more of a long-term metal building I know it uses a heavier gauge steel. Is that something that we can put some literals in for planning commission?
Yeah, we can.
Or some, sorry, Brenda.
We can research that as long as, in my opinion, as long as it doesn't paint us into a specific manufacturer's corner.
Right.
That buildings over a certain gauge become commercially viable, acceptable building materials, and then below that are like the subgrade or substandard. We could try to figure out where that line exists.
That would be helpful for me. I don't know about the rest of council.
Rather not have stuff that's gonna fly out.
First windstorm and over it goes.
Councilman Severing, have you got any comments?
Yeah, I was actually going to say that the one thing we have to remember when we start talking about the materials is a lot of the subdivisions that are governed by CC&Rs will actually already have the recommended materials for any kind of accessory buildings. So unless we're just talking about kind of a generic across the board idea, remember the CC&R, whichever is the most strict, is what governs the decision on appearance.
Councilman Swanson?
How many of our neighborhoods have CC&Rs? Aren't they only the ones with HOAs?
They used to have, I know, required X% brick, and I don't think they were in HOAs, certain square footage. So I'm not an attorney, but we have John with us tonight. But I know previously there used to be CC&Rs in neighborhoods, just residential neighborhoods.
John?
That's true. It doesn't always require an HOA to have a CC&R, but every HOA does have CC&Rs.
Okay.
So my understanding is, council, if we want to change the composition of the building materials, and we want to do that tonight, it would require a change in the ordinance before we pass it, so we can see what that language would be. Otherwise, we defer this to the next meeting.
Well, if we're gonna, for me, if we're going to look at the gauge of the material and take that into consideration, again, I don't know how the rest of council's feeling, but we have to put it off so that we can get that in there.
And I am sensitive to the applicant that's kind of been deferred a number of times, but I want to get this right.
Scott, you got a number just off the top of your head?
Metal gauge? No. Give me my gauge feeler. That really is an issue that I'd like to research a little bit and see if there are cities that even do those standards. I mean, you see, I remember the old Tough Shed commercial when you actually watched TV as a kid, and they would drove a motorcycle over Tough Sheds and then into a metal building. So I know exactly what you mean about crumpled metal buildings versus these types of steel buildings, but I don't have a standard.
Okay. I'm okay with passing what we have and then coming back with materials later. That's me.
Can I ask a question of Mr. Powell? Is your building, are you planning to build it out of metal, or is that just kind of the outside of it? Does it actually, you're wanting it to be composed of this?
Yeah, it'll be what they call a pole barn, so they'll come in and
put 6x6 posts on a corner, and then it'll have timber framing on the inside, and the outside will be the metal, and it's not just a straight metal, it's got ribs in it, so that makes it stronger. So it'll have a metal roof and metal walls, and then it'll have a 9x7 overhead garage door and a window and a man door. And that'll all have white trim that matches our house. So the roof will be a charcoal gray, walls will be light gray, and the trim will be white, so it'll match our house.
Sounds lovely. So, are you okay if we defer that for him to research so that we have the ordinance, so that other people that want to do it, we've got some more clarification? Is that?
Sure.
Okay. All right, that sounds good to me.
We have an ordinance before us.
Have an ordinance number?
We do. It's 20-21-32 is what I show. Is that right, Joyce?
2021-32.
20-21-32.
Mayor, I'll move that we approve ordinance 2021-32 as recommended by the planning commission and discussed with staff working on the materials aspect of bringing that back for further amendment.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. Do we have any further discussion? Councilmember Barker?
Just one comment. My personal opinion, I'd rather just wait. But if we want to do an ordinance tonight and then a change in adoption next time.
Well, this surely isn't our normal procedure, council, but we're doing it this way. And I'm a little bit concerned that we're doing this in a way we normally wouldn't. Any other comments?
I don't like it either. It isn't what we usually do.
Okay, well, let's take a vote on this. This is a roll call vote. Councilman Barker.
No.
Councilmember Stoker.
No.
Councilmember Severing.
No.
Councilmember Swanson.
Yes.
Councilmember Ekstrom.
Yes.
Okay. Motion fails on a 3-2 vote. Scott, if you could get us that information as quickly as possible, because I am sensitive that we have people waiting on this, and like to get that taken care of in the appropriate manner and the appropriate time. So, okay. Thank you. We'll move on now to the discussion on the community garden. Assuming Tiffany is with us on Zoom, is that correct?
Yes, she's here.
All right, Tiffany, do you want to speak to us in regards to the discussion on the community garden?
Sorry, I just promoted her a panelist, Mayor, so she'll be on in just a second.
Okay, are you able to hear me?
We can, Tiffany, go ahead.
Wonderful. Good evening, council and mayor. Tonight I have some information for you for a discussion on North Ogden City's community garden, current and future. North Ogden has had a community garden in place for the last 9 years at the corner of 2550 North and 550 East. I'm sure you've all seen it as you've driven by City Hall right there. Future construction means that we will need to find a place to relocate or a future place to build an additional community garden if that's something that the council desires. A couple places have been proposed for a garden. Future plans for the city have always included a garden, and a couple of those locations that have been proposed are the future Barker Park development on the north, the south side of 2600, the north end of the undeveloped portion of Barker Park. There were plans laid there for a garden space. And it's also been brought up that there are some existing gardens on some city property at 3079 North, 450 East. It was a garden that was put there by the previous owner. The city now owns that property, and both of these locations in this discussion would be good spaces for a community garden. The current gardens provided the Parks and Recreation Department a lot of opportunity for learning and to establish what it takes to create a successful, more permanent garden as we move forward. The current garden was never intended to be a permanent garden, but it was put in place because there was a desire by residents to use it. There are 37 boxes in the current gardens, and almost all of those get used every single year. So as we have gardened with the residents over the last 9 years, some of the things that we feel are important in a more permanent garden moving forward are concrete planter boxes. It is an upfront expense, but these boxes would pay for themselves over time, and they would significantly reduce the maintenance that's required, as even the treated boards and lumber that we've been using on other boxes doesn't hold up to the watering that's there for the garden. Another item that we feel would be important in a future garden is fencing, both for access for the public, for the gardeners, and to help keep the wildlife out. Many of you know that deer like to eat gardens in this area. The third thing I wanted to mention is irrigation. When we lay plans for a future garden, there needs to be an irrigation plan laid out and put in place so that secondary water is available for each of those boxes, so that the residents are able to put each of their boxes on a timer system, so that we can use water-wise guidelines in each of those gardening areas. Community trees, plants, and bushes is also something that we'd like to see included in a future garden, as well as just individual plots and boxes. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on before you go ahead and discuss locations of things is just oversight. So for a very simple garden, just simple boxes with a fence, a volunteer garden manager, and we do have one for the current gardens, but a volunteer garden manager and the box renters, they can coordinate well with the Parks and Recreation Department for upkeep. For a more involved and landscape garden, the city would need to dedicate some more employee time and effort to maintain the property, just as we do our other parks and open spaces. The property that's at 3079 North 450 East at the back of that home there, it does already have existing berries, grapes, and fruit trees that are well established, and they've been there for years. The property at Barca Park, that north end, would be starting from scratch. And we could design a garden exactly as the city would like it to look. Both of those locations would require improvement to irrigation in order to lay that out so that the boxes have access to water. And with either location, whether it's these or any other locations that the city council chooses in your discussion, we've heard feedback from the residents that they really enjoy having that garden space and that opportunity to interact with each other. And it is also just a benefit to the city in that it preserves, it preserves open space. It's essentially a park here in North Ogden. So that's kind of the information I have to present to you tonight. And I'm interested in your comments and your feedback and your priorities for a future garden.
Okay, thank you, Tiffany. Appreciate your work on putting that together. Tiffany, have you put together any cost estimate on things you requested?
I haven't yet, just because I wanted to see where the council was headed. There's a lot of different variations we can do for a lot of different things. And so once I have an idea, if the council says, yes, we'd like to see, concrete boxes and this kind of landscaping, then we'll go back and we'll put together that kind of cost estimate and bring it back to you.
Okay, thank you. Council, do you have any questions of Tiffany while she's with us this evening?
Oh, I do.
Councilmember Ekstrom.
So Tiffany, as I'm looking at the one plot that's not on Barker Park, how do you get to it? Because I'm not seeing access to it. Is there some sort of path or something that people can get into it from?
So right now it's in a backyard. And as the road develops, it will become more accessible, but right now it's just accessible through a side yard.
Okay. And then the other thing was that I'll just put in my personal opinion. I would love to have it at Barker Park just to start the development of that park. I know one of the things that that I know Peggy Barker wanted to do is kind of this kind of walking path and gardens and things like that. And I just think that would be a wonderful way to start. And if we're going to, I just think we want to start somewhere. I think this would be really cool to have there. Plus, I love the idea of community garden. I mean, this is what we're trying to do is create a sense of community. And I mean, as the people that have used it have pointed out, that's a wonderful time for them to come together and discuss gardening. And, this checks all of the boxes of things that I think are worthwhile for the community, for the city to invest in as far as the community goes. Now our personal garden boxes are made with like vinyl fencing material, which has been quite sturdy. I'm sure it's going to be much less expensive than concrete. Have you investigated that as an idea, Tiffany? Or maybe that's a little further down the road, but maybe that's a material that we could investigate using.
Sure. Yeah, we have looked at a few different kinds of boxes. Just as I discussed it with our park superintendent, that was the material that he recommended for the longest lasting, easiest to maintain garden.
Okay.
Good questions, Councilmember Ekstrom. Thank you. John, I do have a question. I think the home that sits on that piece of property right now is rented. What is the time frame on that lease?
So it's currently a 1-year lease.
It's a 1-year lease?
Correct.
Okay. When that house is taken down and the road is widened, would that still be a buildable lot? Would that lot have value in regards to selling for another house? Another home fit on there?
Street, that is the most buildable because it's the deepest. Because as the road moves to the west, it would have plenty of backyard basically that you can still get a house in.
Okay, thank you. I think the issue maybe on the table tonight would be a potential location. I think Tiffany that could come back with additional information in regards to materials, costs, etc. Any other comments from the council this evening? Councilman Barker.
Yeah, I'm in favor of the community garden. My concern would be maybe we look for a different location that already has the infrastructure in place. A couple months ago, we passed we restriped 2600, so there's no parking on there. So if we put it at Barker Park, now we've got to put in a parking lot and all the improvements that lead to it. And with us looking to build the police department, I don't know how we have the money to do infrastructure and all these upgrades that's going to be required, but unless we can find a spot at an existing park or a different location, that would be a lot less expensive. That's
one thought I had, and I think I mentioned this to you, Councilman Swanson. We are going to be building a new water tank that will be underground. The proposed location at this point in time is just off of 2100 and Mountain Road. With that development coming in down there, there will be a road coming off Mountain Road that will go down to, I think it's 2100, will connect down there through that area. I'm wondering, because it will be developed, there will be all the utilities there, and it is an underground facility. We could have a pretty good sized community garden there. I think it's a little bit over an acre. I know there'd have to be some research done on, what we could put on top of there, and we probably need an ordinance to prevent Councilman Swanson from growing illegal things in the gardens, but we could probably do that.
You know, it used to be grown on that property.
Yes, I do. That's why I brought that up. So that might be another option because there will be a irrigation and the road going down there would be there, but it seems like of the locations proposed by Tiffany, it would be very difficult to put a community garden on, I think, a buildable lot. that has quite a bit of value to the city. So that would, her recommendations maybe limit that to Barker Park, but I'd be interested in hearing from you, Councilmember Stoker, what your thoughts are.
Well, I mean, it was kind of, my thought was maybe a little, I don't know, redundant or silly, but it's like when you're talking about fencing and deer and people, I mean, my thought was what's to prevent people from going down and helping themselves to somebody's garden. You know, the strawberries or the apples or whatever, or the tomato looks really good and just helping themselves. I mean, this is, oh, back here, it's a little more contained and not so open and houses are around and I'm sure, you know, it's watched. People know what's going on over there. That was just my thought. I don't know how you would.
I think there's going to be a development. I think there's, the intention is to develop that area down there and take the road from Mountain Road down. So there would be houses. I think the developer's talking about a bit larger lots, but just a thought.
Oh, you're
Because
not talking about Barker Park?
oh, I thought you were talking about the other one.
Oh, no, I'm okay. The other one sounds, I don't think that would be worth looking into.
Yeah.
My comment was on Barker Park, sorry, I misunderstood.
Oh, probably my fault.
Probably my
Councilwoman Stoker. We've also seen, as we've looked at gardens, there are some gardens that are fenced entirely, and then the garden actually has open hours. So there are certain times of day or certain days of the week where the gardens are unlocked and open, and the gardeners can take turns being the overseer of those evening hours, and that helps prevent people from just coming in and out, but it is also less of kind of an open park when that happens.
Thank you.
Any other comments, council, or questions? Councilman Swanson?
Well, I think right now we are 6, 7, almost 8 months away from planting season for gardens. So I think we've got some time to, you know, to see what's going to happen with those water tanks and get that research done. See what we can put on top of that and look at those things. There's always going to be gardening from now till about Mother's Day.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, you know, we're not sure what's going to happen to this garden, right? Because we haven't seen the proposals come back. And
that's right.
If it fits into our budget on the new building, we surely hope it does. But I guess we'll know a little bit more after Friday when the bids come in and ideas. May I suggest that what we do is we ask Dave Espinosa to do some research on if that is even a possibility to have that garden there on top of the water tank. Because I think it would be nice to, even though it's buried, to have it fenced even, which would serve two purposes. And in the meantime, maybe you could get some ideas of cost based upon your proposal at Barker Park, Tiffany, so we have an idea what that might be.
Absolutely.
Is that okay, council? Tiffany, thanks for your good work on putting this together, and I know I've seen a lot of people enjoying the community garden, so.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to item number 8. We'll have a discussion on the Welcome to North Ogden sign. I know it's being discussed in the Economic Development Committee. We have with us tonight J.D. Dalpaz, who will give us a presentation on their thoughts.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks for having me, City Council. So what we've been talking about on the Economic Development Committee about the North Ogden sign is we just got an initial estimate to how much it would cost. And just as a reminder to everyone, this is the sign that's leading into North Ogden City as you pass where Cooperstown apartments are going to be. We already have an agreement in place between the developer of the Cooperstown apartments that they will give us $2,500 towards that sign, so just keep that in mind. And so we haven't gone to bid by any means. We haven't sent it out to several different parties, but the initial bid that came back through John Call's work was approximately $12,500 for a North Ogden sign. And I have to tell you, initially that gave me a little bit of sticker shock And I think it's probably mostly because I don't work in that industry. I don't know what it takes to put one of those together. But Joyce or John, can you flash up what the sign looks like? And what we're planning on is for this sign to utilize RDA funds. So the Economic Development Committee right now is discussing the exact budget that we want. That's the one, perfect. And so we're thinking between the sign and between a few other items that we would need throughout the year, we're just trying to pin down that number. So John was thinking that we're anywhere, but depending on the quality of the product and what materials are used, et cetera, we could be anywhere from $10,000 to $25,000, depending on what's wanted. And I would definitely say that, you know, we'd want to be probably more on the conservative side if it gets us something decent. So that's about it. It's what we're looking at doing. I don't know exactly how the sign became the purview of the Economic Development Committee. I think it's really good that we're trying to put on a good image for the city and that we're trying to make things look great. But I was a little bit confused about, you know, how that came to us. But we have discussed it, and this is kind of what we've come up with.
Okay, any questions for JD? You did mention that we do have an agreement with Cooperstown to contribute $2,500. I know that we've also had discussions with the proposed commercial project across the street in regards to a sign there. I'm not sure, John, if you've heard anything, but we approved that Cooperstown development some time ago, and I haven't seen construction start. I imagine the contribution is based on the fact that they do end up with the development. Is that correct?
Yes, we've wondered in planning and building why we haven't seen anything yet. It seems like the rent department seems pretty good, so we're not sure why that project hasn't started yet.
But the $2,500 is tied to the building, or is that conditional on granting the development agreement?
I would interpret it that it's tied to the building, meaning they're moving forward with the agreement.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple questions. Council, do you have any thoughts you want to share with JD or questions?
So,
Councilmember Extra?
yes, my question is, you know, we had talked about, I don't know what's happening with the 7-Eleven across the street either, but we talked about putting it over there. So are now we moving it across the street to the Cooperstown location, or is this the Cooperstown, they're going to help fund it even if it's not in front of their development?
Cooperstown's further south.
It's further south.
Yeah, it's right on the boundary.
Okay.
And people heading north, that's where you enter the city. On the other side, you'd be exiting the city, right? So maybe that sign says leaving North Ogden. I don't know. I think this is just some ideas that have been tossed around there in regards to that. I think the question on the table would be, do we want them to pursue this sign and then coordinate it with the development? Do we feel it's something that would be good for the city to have a sign there? I think JD, they also talked about having that lit at night. I don't know if that was in the proposal that came back.
That wasn't a part of the proposal, I don't believe. John might be able to clarify, but if we were going to have a lit component of it where it looks nice at night, that just obviously increases the budget. So it'd be more just creeping up the price of things.
So with that, I would assume your willingness to stand there at night with a flashlight is not realistic?
Yeah, I'll do whatever I need to do.
All right, well, that's an option.
Yeah.
Councilman Swanson.
Are there any safety considerations that we have to take into consideration, having a concrete sign? About how big would this thing be?
From what I remember, I think it's about 15 feet wide, but I don't I don't know, John might be able to answer that. It wasn't huge, I don't think.
Oh, I'm just thinking that being made out of concrete and stone, and, someday somebody's gonna drive off the road or slide off. And, John, are there any standards or anything that we have to be aware of?
So
On the side triangle.
yeah, the site triangle, yeah. So we would be having to coordinate with UDOT. I'm not sure if they would let us put it in their right of way, but if they don't, then it would be 10 feet behind the sidewalk. So it would be significantly away from the road, but I think you're right. We need to make sure it was reinforced, so if it was ever hit, that it didn't turn into shrapnel.
I think maybe the other point is we might want it to turn into shrapnel if a car runs into it, so that the driver's not injured. Let's find that out, Ron, before we proceed. Let's find out what UDOT's stance is, and let's make sure it's not in the site triangle. Let's address Councilman Swan's concern of composition of materials. And then, but I guess the main question is the council interested on having a sign welcoming people to North Ogden? I think that would be the primary question. What do you think, Councilmember Ekstrom?
I like having a sign. I mean, we have a wooden sign there now, which is a little hokey, but I think something like this is a little nicer. And I guess to answer JD's question about why it's on the Economic Development Committee is that for economic development, we're trying to make our city appear welcoming to businesses and welcoming anybody that's coming, especially customers. So I guess that puts it in perspective.
Councilmember Severing, what are your thoughts? You think we ought to pursue having a sign entering into North Ogden? Is that a yes or a no, or can you hear us, Councilmember Severing?
Are you muted?
All right, I guess Councilmember Severing is no longer with us. Let's go to Councilmember Swanson.
I'm good.
He's good. Councilman Barker. Councilmember Stoker.
I'm good, just don't plant a tree in front of it so you can't see what it says, like the
Right.
Walker sign. You can't read what's writing.
All right. So JD, it looks like the council is interested in pursuing that. We'll get some answers on the questions that have been raised tonight. Okay. Thank you and your committee for your good work. Councilman Barker.
I can't remember, did you ask for RDA funds for this?
Yes.
So we're about to put a budget request in front of the city council for some RDA funds, and this sign will be a part of that. And I believe it was Blake Severing that took the assignment as soon as John is able to put it on. Well, we want to know what we're doing with the sign before we come up with a number, basically.
And that was going to be my recommendation, is the RDA pays for this.
Yeah, I think that's what he mentioned. I think we do have to continue to look at the purpose of those RDA funds. Is it driving economics, business into our city? And I don't know how we measure that, but that's its purpose. So we need to always keep that in mind. Thank you. JD, any other questions? Let's move on to item number 9. Tonight we're going to hear from Jamie Jones, who is our finance director, and she's going to propose some budget amendments for this fiscal year. So, Jamie, do you want to talk about those, and then we'll go into our public hearing?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. So tonight we just have a few items for consideration on the fiscal year 2021-22 budget. For the general fund, we talked about back when we were adopting the first budget that we were going to budget for a 22nd officer. So that is included on this for half the year. We also have a new server, which is recommended by staff to increase IT security for $12,000. So that is a total of $93,000 that is reducing the fund balance, transferring to the capital projects fund. In capital projects fund, we have some public safety building expenditures We are reducing the fund balance amount coming from general fund to capital projects of 400,000 to meet those expenditures. We also have monies for the impact fee study for all of the impact fees of 180,000, and then we also have stormwater impact fee fund. This is a correction where the budget included 313,000 in the stormwater fund, but it was not coming out of the stormwater impact fee fund, so that is a correction on that one. So.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. Maybe just some clarification on the 400,000. We could let that flow into the general fund and transfer it over. So this isn't detracting from the money that'll be available for the public safety building. This is actually money that's used to purchase the property here, I think on the just, the east of the facility here. That would be needed for the building, and then the other 50,000 is for the geotechnical study for the public safety building. So this will not detract from the amount of money available. It's just that we're taking it out of the general fund right now without transferring it into capital projects. Is that right? Or are you transferring it into capital projects?
So the project is in capital projects fund, and so it's reducing that fund balance by 400,000.
Okay, but it's money for the public safety building. It's not reducing money for the public safety building. So this would be part of our proposed cash investment in the building.
Yes.
And that's for the property purchase and the $50,000 for the geotechnical study.
Correct.
Correct. And then as pointed out here, the impact fee study will come out of each respective
yes.
enterprise fund.
Yes, each of the impact fees for water, sewer, stormwater, and then parks and public safety will be coming out of capital projects.
Right. And the public safety is we don't have an impact fee right now in public safety.
Correct.
But this may result in a impact fee for public safety.
Correct.
What's going on? Any questions, council? Councilmember Ekstrom.
I do. So what did we end up, so was it 350,000 that we got that property for? Was that the sale price?
I think it was a little bit less.
Okay. So this is kind of a rounding
This
up.
is a rounding to cover what we think is necessary for those two things.
It is very hard to sit in this seat.
I'm
It's like
sorry.
I have my back to everybody all the time.
Yeah.
Anyway, Jamie, where's Jamie go? There she is. Okay. So tell me about the impact fee study for the funds. Is that kind of like a financial study or?
So I'm gonna divert that to John. John, can you take that?
Sure. So impact fees, there's three components to what we're talking about. One is an overall system-wide analysis and plan. So for each of those components, water, storm, sewer, parks, and public safety, there would be an analysis of what facilities do we have, what facilities do we need. And then there'd be a separate document that touches on what are the needs in the next 10 years, which is the impact fee facilities plan. And then the third document would be a financial document that would say, what is it going to cost for those next 10 years worth of improvements? And how do we make sure that the people who are building new houses are paying their fair share of those costs? And so some of this $180,000 will actually be recouped through impact fees. Some of it will, or some of these projects that we're talking about will be fixing existing deficiencies that we can't recoup money for, but the majority of what we're talking about will be impact fee eligible expenses, which means the city should be reimbursed at some point in the near future. In theory, it should all be reimbursed within the next 6 years, 6 to 10 years.
Okay, that sounds good. Do we have is there like a consulting company that does these studies? Is that who we've got? Who does it?
there are several, most of them are engineering firms. And then we did an RFP and had one of the firms that we've used a little bit lately submitted this successful proposal. And they are doing a lot of the work in-house, but the financial component, they will reach out to a third-party contractor that was part of their proposal to do the work to finalize the document.
Okay. Want to make sure I know what we're paying for. Thanks, John.
John, by law, do we have to do a study every so often to make sure our impact fees are correct, that we're not overcharging in addition to maybe undercharging? Is there a requirement that we have to do that?
There's not a specific timeline required, but we are required to make sure our impact fees are fair. And if they're found to not be fair, then we have to return any money that's been collected in the past year. So it's good practice. It's been a good while since we've updated these documents. And with the public safety building coming online, we need to do that one so that we can collect some impact fees to help recoup some of that cost over the next 20 years.
Just a reminder, those impact fees, as you mentioned, apply to new homes built in the city.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions for Jamie?
So,
Council Member Ekstrom.
sorry, I have
No, it's
lots
okay.
of questions all the time. So John, do we not currently have an impact fee for public safety? So this would be something that we would be adding, which seems like a good idea.
We don't really, largely because impact fees are only eligible for capital projects like buildings. And so we haven't had the type of expense that would be impact fee eligible in public safety for a while. The fire department does currently collect an impact fee, which has helped fund their buildings, and for commercial properties have actually paid for some of the fire trucks, I believe, under that impact fee plan.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions of John or Jamie before we have a public hearing on the matter? Seeing none, then we'll enter council into a public hearing. If we have any comments from the public, that'll be the time to make those in regards to those proposed amendments. John, do we have anyone with us electronically that would like to comment?
No hands at this time.
I don't see anyone here with us that would like to make a comment. So at this point in time,
Move to close public hearing.
thank you, Councilmember Swanson.
Second.
Have a second from Councilmember Stoker. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? None. Okay, so at this point in time, council, we need to consider an action to amend the proposed budget for fiscal year 2021 and 2022. I'm looking for anyway, do we have a motion?
It's in an ordinance.
I don't see that on here. I don't see an ordinance number, Joyce. I was thinking since it's a roll call vote, it would be.
Do 2021 33.
2021-33. There you go, Councilmember Swanson. We'd be looking for a motion to approve ordinance 2021-33, which would amend the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget as presented by Jamie this evening.
Mayor, I'll move that we approve ordinance 2021-33, amending the fiscal year 2021-22 budget as discussed.
Thank you. Do we have a second to Councilmember Swanson's motion?
I'll second.
Have a second. Any further discussion? This being an ordinance, I'll call for a roll call vote. Councilmember Severing, are you with us?
Yes.
Okay, is that your vote?
Yes, that is my vote.
Okay,
I started to cough earlier and had to go get a drink.
no problem. Councilmember Ekstrom,
Yes.
Councilmember Swanson,
Yes.
Councilmember Barker,
Yes.
and Councilmember Stoker.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. We'll now enter into another discussion led by Jamie. She's going to present a resolution amending the consolidated fee schedule.
Again. Right, thank you, Mayor. Some items to be considered for the fee schedule. We are adjusting the garbage waste container fee for the building permits and also on the solid waste side to reflect a market rate instead of just a flat rate of $200. And I believe this is because we kind of see the fluctuation of the garbage cans come to us anywhere between like 180 to 240,000 per receptacle can, and it's just kind of hard to keep up to date on the fee schedule. So we just want it to say market rate. That way we could facilitate that easier. We are adjusting the animal control fees. A lot of these fees used to be misdemeanors, and they have been reduced to infractions, and so that's just to clean up that section. We are adjusting the North Shore passes, and I do have a couple corrections since this was out on the packet. I don't know if you have that. I don't know if you're controlling that, Joyce, or if John is.
It's John right now.
Okay, anyway, so just on the age group, it said per lap, per lane, but we are changing that to a full lap pool for 1.5 hours. And then we've also changed the standard group lesson on the swim lessons from $60 to, or excuse me, from $57 to $60 for a non-resident. Also changing the senior center facility rentals just to a flat 1.5 hour rate, just dropping that, I believe, from a 2 hour or 3 hour rental, just to help facilitate scheduling on that one. Also adding a non-resident blue can charge of $15 per month. This is just because there isn't one on there already. So just to be consistent with all the other fees that we are charging. And then also to adjust the fire hydrant meter usage, that 19 cents that we have approved earlier on earlier fee schedules. We just realized that this one wasn't increased either. Any questions?
Any questions on those adjustments to the fee schedule? I know with the garbage cans, not only are they hard to get, but the materials are made out of just continue to increase. So it's simply just keeping up with the cost increases, and who knows what they're fluctuating so rapidly. Any questions for Jamie?
So, Jamie, so I'm looking at like the facility, is that of the pool, I'm assuming, the facility rental? So that's gonna go up quite a lot. I mean, it used to be like a 3 hour rental for 200 people was like $350. So are we going to be able to get more rent? Maybe I need to talk to Tiffany.
Yeah, I was going to say, I believe Tiffany's on the line in case you have, if you have questions for her.
So I need to have a meeting with her anyway, so we can talk about all of these things, because she probably did a financial analysis about these. She's usually very careful. I'm very happy with her. She withstands my grilling. But yeah, that seems like a better utilization of the pool, and the ability to, especially during really peak times, which is July. So if she can get some more rentals in there, we'll kind of probably have to see how that goes. If an hour and a half is long enough for anybody to want to only have it for an hour and a half. But. Okay.
I do have a little bit of information for you on that if you would like that one.
Oh, yes, please, Tiffany.
Okay, so what we've done is we've reduced the time from a 2 hour facility rental to an hour and a half, with the potential to back-to-back 2 groups of rentals. So throughout the years we have filled up our rental capacity. And then initially we said, okay, well, we'll split the night. So instead of just one small group coming, we'll split the night by capacity. And that's allowed 4 different groups to come, but we are still booking out in the early months of the year for the entire season. So the demand for the use of the facility is higher. So what we're hoping to do is split that night and extend a little bit later so that there is the potential for a 1.5 hour reservation initially. And if it's full, then another 1.5 hour reservation opens up, or a group could book a full 3 hours like they have done on Fridays and Saturdays.
Okay, that sounds good. All right. Thanks, Stephanie.
You bet.
Any other questions? Okay, council, if you're all right with those adjustments to the fee schedule, I'd be looking for a motion to approve resolution number 15-2021. Do we have a motion to approve that resolution?
Mayor, I move that we approve resolution 15-2021, amending the consolidated fee schedule as outlined.
Thank you. Councilmember Ekstrom, do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Councilmember Stoker. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Councilmember Stoker?
Yes.
Councilmember Barker?
Yes.
Councilmember Swanson?
Yes.
Councilmember Ekstrom?
Yes.
Councilmember Severing?
Yes.
Resolution passes unanimously. We'll move on to item number 11. John Call, our city manager and city attorney, will be leading this discussion. And this is to consider amending ordinance 20-21-30 for protective ground cover. John?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Back to first world problems. So this is the same ordinance that the council saw a couple weeks ago with the language that the council asked for. So technically, this ordinance is amending the ordinance from last time frame. There's been a few grammatical changes and one format change. The first one, let me make sure that I share the right screen with you. The first one is the renumbering. It should go E and then a 1, and then we put an ED at the end of maintained. And then the language the council asked for is here in blue. So this provision basically says that the fire marshal must follow the International Fire Code. And that was the code section dealing with this that the fire marshal gave me, that 304.1.2. But those are the changes in the ordinance from when you saw it last time. But this would amend the previous one. Any questions?
John, I believe the amendment was generated by a citizen who was with us last meeting that was concerned that the fire marshal had sole discretion with nothing defined on what his decision would be. So I think this corrects that and gives us some guidance that can be followed by the fire marshal. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Call from the council? Councilmember Barker.
Just a comment. I should put my other hat back on here. The International Fire Code it is actually a lot more vague than what our ordinance is. It does not just deal with vegetation and weeds. It deals with your yard waste and storage and hazards. And the whole reason I became a firefighter was so I could drive around and give citations out. So I am looking forward to this because this is my favorite part of my job. I was actually hoping you'd take this away from me and give it to the police department because we get calls weekly of people complaining about their neighbors' grass being dry and it being a fire hazard. Except this year because everyone's grass is dry. So
well, we surely don't want to take your dreams away from you.
I know.
So
I appreciate everyone's concern, but I am I'm not going to be driving around looking for dead grass.
And we understand that. It just gives us some guidance here.
And
Any other?
so just as a clarification, technically the citation would still come from our code enforcement, but it would be the fire marshal who would let them know if there was a violation of the fire code. So it essentially kind of merges the two offices together, but the citation would come from our code enforcement.
And we let you drive around with our code enforcement officer. It makes you feel good, right?
So that is actually what happens. When I do see a violation, I do work with code enforcement. It's the same as if we roll up on an illegal burn. I call the police department, and it just runs through the city's court system.
Well, sounds like this then is not too dramatic of a change and will give us some guidance. Any other questions? This is amending ordinance number 20-21-30. Do we have a motion to amend that ordinance?
So moved.
So moved by Councilmember Stoker. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Swanson. Any further discussion? Councilmember Barker.
I should have said this earlier. This ordinance is not a conflict of interest, but it relates specifically to my job. So would you like me to vote or not?
Yes, why don't you go ahead and vote?
Okay.
Thank you for disclosing your concern. All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Councilman Severing.
Yes.
Councilman Stoker.
Yes.
Councilman Barker.
Yes.
And Councilmember Ekstrom.
Yes.
The ordinance is amended as proposed by unanimous vote. We'll move now on to item number 12. This will also be presented by John Call, our city manager and attorney. And this is to consider an ordinance for noise related to the use of engine brakes. John, maybe you could give just a little background on that. Hello,
Thank you,
John.
Mayor. Yeah, sorry. The background on this is, as our police officers have been going out to try and enforce the noise ordinance related to the use of engine brakes, they have found that the roads in the city that are most likely to see the use of engine brakes fall somewhere between 5.5% and 6.3% grade. And it changes depending on where you're at on the roadway. And so the police have asked that to help make this enforceable, that if the numbers change from 6% to 5%, which technically means people can use engine brakes on a lower grade, then we'd be able to effectively enforce the areas without engine brakes as well as the areas with engine brakes. The idea being that the roads that are the most hazardous for trucks to not use engine brakes, which is Washington Boulevard, 1050, and portions of 800 East, they would now be able to clearly use it for the whole length, as opposed to trying to go back and forth between the two. And so the request and the city engineer reviewed the grades, and the recommendation from the police and the engineer was to change it from 6% to 5%. And we don't believe that will have a dramatic effect on the areas we're trying to protect, which are the more residential areas that are not on as steep as the slope. You know, even roads like 2600 and 3100 that don't have that steep slope, engine brakes would still be restricted there.
I believe, John, there was some discussion about this increases safety too.
Yeah, because because on those main roads that have a stoplight or a stop sign down at the bottom of them, this makes it clear that engine brakes are allowed, and that people don't have to. It should just help make it clear for the drivers as well as the officers.
Okay, thank you, John. Are there any questions for John regarding this ordinance? All right, seeing no questions, I would be looking for a motion then in regards to the use of engine brakes as discussed by Mr. Call, do we have a motion to approve that ordinance number 20-21-33?
34. 33.
So the next one will be 35 then, huh?
Yeah, so this one's 34.
Okay. Let me restate that. Do we have a motion to approve ordinance number 2021-34?
Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 2021-34 regarding the use of engine brakes on slopes, which are 5% to 6% of grade.
Okay. Is that correct, John?
Yes.
Okay. We have a second.
Second.
Second from Councilmember Stoker. Any discussion on this ordinance? It's in your packet, so hopefully you have a chance to look at it. Seeing no discussion then, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilmember Stoker?
Yes, and who doesn't like to hear Jake breaks? I do.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Councilmember Swanson?
Yes.
Councilmember Severing?
Yes.
Councilmember Barker?
Yes.
And Councilmember Ekstrom?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. We'll now move on to item number 13, which will be also addressed by John Call. And this is a ordinance related to protecting drinking water sources in the city of North Ogden. And this is regarding ordinance number 2021-35. John?
Thank you, Mayor. So this ordinance is a standard ordinance that we got from one of our engineering companies that several cities have adopted. And the idea behind this ordinance is it establishes certain distances from our municipal water wellheads or drinking water wellheads that prohibits certain types of activities. A lot of this is codified in state code, and that's where a lot of the rules are coming from. But it was recommended by our engineer to have this in our code as well, just to make it clear what's allowed, what isn't, because we do have an interest in protecting our drinking water sources. So the language is somewhat complex in some areas and somewhat oversimplistic in others. But the idea is that there's two different zones, 100-foot zone, 250-foot zone, and there's different activities allowed in those different areas. So anyways, did any questions on this one, Mayor?
Let me check with the council. Councilmember Ekstrom is surprising us with a question.
Absolutely. Well, just because we were just talking about putting
I'm fine with it. I just was surprised.
Well, we were talking about putting the community garden next to one, right?
Mhm.
So that's going to cause a problem. That was just the first thought that came to my mind. A lot of it, I was like, what? And I don't know who this applies to generally. Is this like, if we're going to have development close to these water sources? Kind of give me a for instance, John. Why do we need to have this in place? I guess who's going to violate this, or when is the possibility it could be?
So I didn't understand the first part of your question. You said the community gardens within a certain distance of one.
Well, we were just talking about that because we're going to put another well up in that area of these, Mountain Road and 2100 between in there. So is this something that's going to cause a problem with that? Or do we not need to? Anyway, does that make sense? I'm having a little.
Jason is checking into that up there on the difference is that's a tank. And so
Okay.
A water tank is sealed so that contaminants shouldn't get into it. Whereas a well is typically just, a pipe that goes down into the ground. And the idea being that we don't want contaminants within a certain distance of that pipe because it has the ability to track down into the water supply. And so that would be the difference, but it is only the city's municipal wells that we're establishing these zones around. And it does prohibit a lot of stuff though, things like some chemicals, the use of chemicals in areas, as well as sewer lines and other things that are just the health department and the state health folks have kind of established as, areas that are or activities that could cause a contamination.
Okay, and we've got those clearly marked throughout the city, so we like know where all of these, I mean, my head goes to going to, when I lived in Texas, they had the aquifer, right? It's like all of the city water, everything came from the aquifer. So we kind of have that under North Ogden with the artesian wells, and they're kind of various places throughout the city, just not under the whole thing. So we kind of have these access points essentially where we draw it out from. Is that kind of where we're getting the pipes going down into this particular well?
So it's a protection of the drinking water wells that the city owns. So it's not every well in the city. There's a lot of artesian wells that are being used for agricultural purposes. But this would, in my opinion, include the stump, because that is an artesian well that's used for drinking water. And so there just need to be, we are aware of all these, where all these are. We're pretty confident that there's no violations. And so just making it clear that we're not going to allow any future violations. So.
Thank you, Councilmember Ekstrom. I see Dave Espinosa would like to.
I was just going to help John. But...
did you want to come to the podium and give us some insight?
No, I was just going to help John, but I think he cleared it up pretty good. So what you're saying is, yes, there are aquifers under there. We have pipes that run there. And we already monitor these zones that we're talking about. We're going to put it into our, it just make it official, but we've already done that. So to give you an idea, if you have a well, 100 feet around that well, we monitor anything that percolates into the ground whatsoever, like any oils, salts, whatever. And then there's another zone that is, I think, 350 feet beyond that other things can't be, if there's a sewer line in there, it has to be a sealed sewer line. It can't have joints in it. There's different things like that. So what we're doing is just trying to clear all that up to make sure that everybody understands that, if you are going to try to build next to one of our wells, that there's these things you can't do. So.
I'm thinking about protecting it.
Hey Dave, I have a question. Does this just apply to city wells? Councilmember Ekstrom brought up the fact that there's other people who have wells that are tapping into that. So how do we protect their wells?
That's a good question. This is just for our wells, and I mean, I think anybody else that has a well on their property probably should kind of have an idea of what is being, within at least that 100-foot zone of their well as well.
I mean, they're in the same aquifer. They may not be as deep.
Yeah.
But they're in the same aquifer, right? Well, John, what do we do there with these other wells?
I would probably say they fall under the jurisdiction of the county health department. And I do know that most of those homes are supposed to be doing testing. I don't know if they do. But I think, unfortunately, there are several of those homes that are on systems, and things like that. So this ordinance does kind of talk about the retail water supplier, which is the city's stuff and not the private side.
So Brian, you have well water, right? That's what is in your house, and like Lyman and Lonnie's, and all of y'all around there, right? Mm-hmm. Are you careful?
What are you dumping into that?
But also in the city pumps, I noticed when my well goes down, so it goes full circle here.
Any other questions for John while we have him? All right, John, do you have any further comments? If not, council, I'd be looking for a motion to approve this ordinance, which is 20-21-35 to protect the drinking water sources of North Ogden City. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Councilmember Stoker. Do we have a second?
Second.
I second that, Mayor.
Okay, we'll go with Councilmember Barker on this one. Any further discussion? All right, let's have a roll call vote. Let's start with you, Councilmember Swanson.
Yes.
Councilmember Barker.
Yes.
Councilmember Ekstrom.
Yes.
Councilmember Stoker.
Yes.
And Councilmember Severing.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. We have with us tonight also Dave Espinosa, who's our Public Works Director, and Casey Hunsaker, who's our street lead. And they would like to just make a short presentation on snow removal so the citizens understand kind of how things are going. Dave, do you want to lead out or is Casey going?
I'll let Casey start.
Okay, Casey.
Good evening, council and mayor. So it's the time of year where, we saw it this morning in Logan, snow's coming. Hopefully we'll have more snow than last year. That's our hope. Every year. So every year at this time, the Public Works Department begins preparations by mounting snowplows on our trucks and preparing our drivers. We have a number of new drivers this year, so that they know where their routes are. On the screen there, you can see our snowplow routes that we have laid out. Every different color there is a different route. Those routes are all manned by two large trucks apiece. We have 12 large trucks and 10 cul-de-sac trucks that are pickups with the snowplows on them. Typically, we have our main routes, which is another page. I believe it's above it. Those are plowed by 2 trucks each, and each of those trucks have the wings on the side. So those are 12-foot plows with 8-foot wing on each side, on the side. So each truck covers the width of about roughly 2 trucks. Once they're done, those roads are listed in the packet. Those are 3100 north, 2600 north, Pleasant View Drive, Alberta Drive, 2850 north, 1050 east, Mountain Road, Fruitland, 2100 north, 1700 north, 575 east, and with the road widening project that is finishing up in the next few weeks, 400 east and 450 east where it curves are going to be a particular concern for us. We're going to need more of our drivers to hit those roads to cover it from the middle out. When we plow from the middle line to the curb to prevent buildup along the median so that emergency vehicles have access to homes and they don't have to go around the big rick of snow in the middle of the road.
Anything else, Casey?
Any other questions?
Oh, we have some questions. We just want to make sure you and Dave have your.
We're ready.
He's ready. I don't know if I am.
He's ready, huh? Any questions? I know a lot of the calls I get when snow plowing starts is how we're pushing the snow in cul-de-sacs. Dave, I think we've had a conversation about that. We can just make sure that those, I know we use some folks from parks and stuff to do the cul-de-sacs. If we could just remember that, not to push that snow in front of the hydrants and in front of mailboxes so people can't get that. And I know it's difficult because it piles up, but if we could just be aware of that.
Typically, our cul-de-sac drivers are our newer drivers. We typically have a few years before we're putting the big trucks. When we have our snowplow meeting with the staff and we go over the routes and everybody gets their books, I ask them all to go out and look at each of their cul-de-sacs before there's snow on the ground. Sometimes they don't, but I ask them to go and kind of prepare themselves to know where the best place to put that snow would be. You don't want to put it between 2 driveways because then you're going to cause a problem with being able to see or
usually I suggest to them to find the biggest park strip that doesn't have anything in it and put the snow, as much snow there as possible without pushing it over onto the sidewalks. As far as going out when we go out, the on-duty officer will contact Brian Galvez, our assistant public works director, and he will go out and make the determination of whether it's a salt storm, a big truck push, or a full push. And from there, he'll call out snowplow drivers to come out and clear the roads, and we'll get it done as fast as possible.
It's kind of a special day for Brian, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It was tiny before, and now it's Brian. So
yeah,
it's all on him.
He's talking about my birthday.
It's his birthday today. So we can't not recognize a fellow Scotty by any means, right? Councilmember Stoker. I would just remind too, Dave, of the promise that was made not to push snow in front of the gate there on Pleasant View Drive. I think, or Alberta, remember, had a concern. What was her name?
Carmen.
Oh,
Yeah. So don't let us down on that, Dave.
we got that figured out.
Then I think it's important to know that the rationale used behind how streets are plowed. A lot of citizens are wondering why it takes longer to get to their streets. I think you touched on this, but we have kind of major thoroughfares, and then we have safety issues.
Yeah, so our mains are our first priority, and that's those 4 big trucks. The 3 of them have wings, 1 of them doesn't. And sometimes residents will see us driving down the road. We don't have our plow down. We have our plow up and our salters are off. We're not throwing salt, and they think they get confused as to why we're not clearing the snow off. And it's just so that we can get to our assigned routes, so we can get it cleared, and we're not double treating the road with the salt.
I think we did change a couple routes, Dave, last year, so that some of the people that were always last, we kind of moved them up.
Yep.
And I do just want to clarify that the Mayor Street does not get plowed first.
No.
Yours is gonna be like one of the last.
I know. Just wanted to clarify that.
That road's on a loop, so when they get to it, they get to it.
Well, people have said that people who live on that street are a little loopy. So,
I didn't say that, Mayor.
I know, it was Dave. All right, anything else, Dave or Casey or Brian, you want to add? Just wanted to let the public know kind of where we're at, how we're looking at things, and we do hope for a real good snowfall this year.
We are gonna be soon letting everybody know they can't park on the road, so.
Yeah, I think that the no on-street parking is from November 15th to April 15th, I believe. And so that notice will go out as well, March 15th. March 15th, sorry.
Maybe April this year.
Yeah, maybe April if there's snow.
We're hoping. So you guys do a great job, and we appreciate your efforts there. And if we get a lot of snow, I hope everyone will be tolerant, because we need it. So thank you very much. All right, so we'll move on to our council department reports. We'll start with Councilmember Severing. Councilmember Severing, do you have anything to report to us on Public Works?
Absolutely. We're grateful for the work, the Public Works employees. They're awesome. And we're pleased to announce that probably this Thursday and Friday, I suppose that may depend on weather conditions, but this Thursday and Friday, we're to have asphalt on 400. And then also probably within about a month to a month and a half, at 450 or 400 and Alberta Drive, we'll have a street sign there. So street lights, I should say. So that's what I needed to report tonight.
Thank you, Councilmember Severing. Dave, has the weather delayed us paving the road?
No, we're planning on Thursday and Friday, so.
Thursday and Friday.
In fact, they're gonna start some of it tomorrow, but it'll be the first lift, which will mean they'll start getting the first layers down. And
Okay.
then Thursday and Friday are.
And we're hoping to get it all striped and ready to go by the end of the month. That's our goal.
Striping, and then, like Blake said, the 400 East in Alberta light is about 6 to 8 weeks out, so, as of right now, we'll put up temporary stop signs and treat it just like we have for the last, how many years? With the stop signs on Alberta and 2850. And then once those lights go in, then we'll follow the signals, so.
Dave, what about opening up a Pleasant View Drive and getting those cement barriers in there?
So once they get the asphalt down is when they'll start pouring those pork chops, is what they call them. They're the islands that will force traffic, right-hand turns only. Once they get those down, then we'll get it back open up.
And the same across the street, right?
Yes,
So we plan on having those here right after the pavement's put down.
Yeah, we're probably not more than a month away, so.
Okay. So will we open the road until those are put in?
The,
Pleasant View Drive, if it's another month?
that's a good question. I think they're gonna keep it closed just to make sure that we don't start people doing something that they're not.
And I don't know how we'll fix 26. I think you brought that up. I think you brought up Councilmember Swanson 2650. I don't know how we're gonna solve that, people trying to come across the road in the
Trim pork chops on both sides.
Yeah, but not for a month. We can prevent that with Pleasant View Drive because we have it closed, but 2650 will be wide open, so.
Play Frogger over there.
We'll do it.
Mayor, if I may.
Casey.
I know Clayton with Granite, our project manager, has mentioned putting barricades up in the middle of 450 or 400 to prevent people from making a left off of 2650.
So that'll be,
In the meantime.
okay, perfect. Thank you for that information. Councilmember Barker, do you have anything to report to us tonight on the planning and building?
I didn't get in contact with the planning and building today. I got called into a lot of meetings that I wasn't planning on. But building's going crazy, drive around our city, and I didn't get the number, but I'll have it for you in November of how many building permits and all the other fun stuff. And we heard from planning tonight, they're busy as well.
I believe we have a new electronic system in for building permits and inspections and things, don't we? That
I hadn't heard if it was up and running, but I knew they were working on it. Yeah.
How's that going, Scott?
It's going well. We've got only 4 or 5 building permits in the new MyGov software, but every builder that we've talked to, we've told them that paper submittals are no longer permitted, that it has to come in on MyGov, and transition seems to be smooth.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Councilmember Barker?
On my other assignment with the mosquitoes, they are all dying. So, but we have had 2 West Nile deaths in Weber County this year.
All right, so they'll be froze to death then with this weather is what you're saying. Okay, good work. All right, let's go on to public comments. Do we have any public comments this evening?
Brenda Ashdown, I live in North Ogden. The longer your meeting goes, the more comments I have. So excited for the road.
You've got 3 minutes, so.
I have 3 minutes. First of all, concerning the fence for the garden, just a personal observation. Our whole property is fenced. It doesn't keep the deer out, or the raccoons, or the skunks. So, I mean, I understand maybe for keeping people out, but to go to the expense of building the fence is not going to keep the pests out. It's just not. I do have a question as far as on Alberta and Washington. There was the Bates Crusade house. It's still standing. Is that going to be taken down? Are we waiting for a certain time to take it down?
We have Dave and John here. That was our original intention. John?
So we are waiting. The landowner has it, or the previous owner has a few items to still remove. Then we're going to evaluate what the options are, and then probably bring it back to the council, since there will be a financial impact on what they would like to do. We'll come back with one of 3 recommendations: either leave the house as it is and sell it, either move it and sell it, or tear it down and sell it. And so those are the 3 options that we'll investigate, but we're trying to make sure we give that family enough time to move the things out that they need moved out. Since we don't, with the project going on, we don't have a need to move it, or get it sold here in the next month or two.
Okay, just curious, thank you. My last concern is about the sign coming into North Ogden. Seems like a very expensive expense. It seems expensive to me to spend that much money for a sign coming into North Ogden. And we also have a road that comes in from Pleasant View. Is there going to be a sign there? We also have a road that comes in from 2700. Is there going to be a sign there? Or are we only concerned with the entrance into North Ogden from Washington? I think we can have a nice sign that can be less expensive. My opinion. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Brenda. Any other comments from those in attendance this evening? John, do we have any comments from Zoom?
We do have someone, D-A-L-L-I, I guess it's Dally, who would like to talk.
All right, if you'd state your name, if you're a resident.
Sorry, I must have missed the end, John. It's Dallin. I am a current North Ogden resident. Just a couple concerns. One, I feel like with a community garden, I feel like if the city provides land for a community garden, that should be enough, especially if there's water access. Two, I just want to clarify that the official city committees are listed on the city website, correct? Like the Arts Guild, Barker Park Committee, Economic Development, General Plan Advisory, and Planning Commission. Are there any other official city committees?
The Public Safety Building.
Public Safety Building.
Okay, and do they have public meetings?
They do.
Okay. So could we get the website updated to just, I mean, maybe you list them in the agendas and minutes, but in the committees and commissions, it's not listed on the website. And then my other question is, as far as city resources go, if an organization is requesting city monies, or whether it's a charity or a business, they would come to council and request that, correct? It couldn't be given by a city employee or anything like that. It would have to have council approval. Does that make sense?
So
did you understand that question?
Any money that's being expended would come through the budget that the council approves. A good example is when we do things for like the Chocolate Art Festival, that's something that the council has approved, even though the invoices are signed by city employees.
I think the question might be, is there money in departmental budgets where they have the discretion to make contributions to charities or 501c?
That is a lot better worded than mine, Mayor. But yes, that's what I was going for.
Well, and I think the additional thing you're going for, Dallin, too, is the Parks and Trails Committee. Is that an official city committee? It was originally, I think, proposed to be a 501c3, which apparently did not happen. But I don't believe that is an official city committee. It has not been appointed by the mayor and approved by the council. So that, John, if I understand correctly, is not a recognized city committee.
That's correct. And I believe 3 or 4 years ago, the committee actually came to the city and asked for some money to get some geo coins put together, and then they sold them, and then they were supposed to pay the city back. But I think that's the last time that group has been before the council requesting money. I'm not aware of any funds given to them since then.
Use the term supposed to pay the city back, John. Did we get paid back?
I'll follow up. I don't know for sure how many of those coins they sold.
Okay, but at this point in time, it's not a recognized city committee. It has no authority to spend money. So shortly, just like any other group of citizens, they can come to the council and express their opinions and make comments.
Yep.
And John, do we assign, since we're on this subject, and I know it's a question out there, do we assign city employees to these committees to represent the city if it's not a city committee?
We have pretty routinely supported various groups in the city. The Parks and Trails Committee, I believe, uses the Parks building for their meetings. Kiwanis Club uses the Senior Center for their meetings. I feel like there's another group out there that does, well, the Northview Seniors use the Senior Center. But yeah, so I think those are the.
I think most recently, the Cherries Day Citizens Committee. We had people assigned to that, and we have citizen involvement for this upcoming year. So
Yeah.
I think we have a history of supporting things that affect the city. But any money spent on those are authorized by the council.
Okay,
Correct?
I was just wondering if I created like Dallin's barbecue committee and we smoked brisket and invited city council if I could get money for brisket.
You couldn't, but we'd surely show up.
Well, I know you'd show up, but yeah, I was just wondering.
So, John, any further clarification on that?
No, I'll get the answer on the geocoins.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else, John, on Zoom?
No, not at this time.
Anyone here that'd like to make another comment? Okay, I don't see any. Council, mayor, staff comments, and this would be a time, council, if you have any comments on the original public comments that were made, any responses, now that you've had time to think through that, and if you'd like to respond, that would be the time. Let's start with council members. Councilmember Barker.
I'd like to thank our public works. We had a great yard cleanup last week, or with the green lights. It seemed like it was well used, and I think it went well.
Okay, good job. Councilmember Stoker.
Ditto, I'd like to thank the public works, but I was a little disappointed that there was nothing in your snow removal plan to stay out of my yard. Cars.
Pile the snow there.
Make me a berm.
Yeah.
You can pile it in mine. Good job, guys. Thanks.
Council member Severing, do you have anything? Anything you've heard from citizens you'd like to bring up?
Nope, I haven't heard anything. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Swanson.
Just a couple of things as we approach budget season. I've been doing some reading and listening to different ideas on budgeting, and good government accounting is crazy as go. I know. Can you believe it? Don't fall over, Mayor. You may not get back up.
Yeah, my age, that's a possibility.
We do have a firefighter here, so we've got you covered. No, one of the interesting things that I heard recently was, especially here in Utah, you know, we constitutionally are mandated to have balanced budgets. And so we often pat ourselves on the back saying, well, we've got a balanced budget. The thought is that we turn more towards outcome-driven budgeting, that we look at not just are we staying within the budgets that we set, but are we achieving the outcomes? So, you know, you might have Department A that says they get $100 this year and they spend 98, and we pat each other on the back. They did great. They're down, you know, they're under by 2%. But did they actually accomplish with that $98 what we had set out to accomplish? Because if we didn't, then we're not necessarily spending the money well. We're not necessarily being fiscally prudent. So this year, as we go to our departments and we talk about budgeting, I'd like to see us take an outcome-driven, more of an outcome-driven approach where we start, it's not quite zero-based budgeting, but it is looking at the various programs and expenditures that we have and looking at, are they effective in accomplishing what we want to accomplish? If not, are we spending too much? Are we not spending enough? Are we just doing it the wrong way? But looking at outcomes, not just budget versus, expenditures versus budgeted expenditures, but looking at, are we actually getting the bang for the buck that we're hoping to, and not just spending money and staying under budget?
In the business world, they call it a return on investment, right?
Well,
Sort
yeah,
of.
but we don't do that in government.
Well, maybe we should start, but
We could write a book.
you'd be proud of me. I have to get so many hours of continuing professional education to keep my CPA license. So today I completed, you'd be proud of me, governmental accounting and reporting. And I did luckily pass the test, but the point being that it talks about that. It talks about budgeting for outcomes,
right,
and what the results, were. So I think that's
and not
surely
just
something
budgeting for outcomes, but then analyzing the outcomes to see if the budget spent was well worth having, even though we may be under budget.
Yeah, two aspects, right? When we budget, we should look at the money's being spent, what is the purpose and what are the projected outcomes? Why are we budgeting that? And then we measure at the end of the budget period, did we accomplish the very reason that we allocated or appropriated the money?
So if we get that message out to our department heads to start looking at that for this year, that outcome driven budget, and also analyzing the proposals that we've had in the past, and are we actually hitting them?
I think another thing we need to talk a little bit about, we have a capital projects fund, right?
Right.
We got to talk about maybe capital improvements fund, because a lot of these buildings that we have, are going to need maintenance and improvements along the line. And so we ought to figure out how we can maybe begin to fund a capital improvements fund for, our major buildings at least.
Sure.
So.
And then the other thing I had, just responding to Dallin on his public comments, I pulled up the meetings and minutes tab on the city webpage, and from October 5th through November 10th, usually keeps about 30 days running on there. We have scheduled meetings for public safety, city council, planning commission, general plan advisory, public safety again. So as far as I've seen recently over the last year or so, every official committee that has a meeting ends up on this page for the date that it's scheduled for. And then there'll be a packet that gets released with it and an agenda.
And then follow up with subsequent minutes.
Yes.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Anything else? Councilmember Ekstrom?
I
Did you
do
have a
not
chance
anything
to?
else.
You don't have anything else?
I had lots and lots of questions.
All right. I think we've got everybody. Just a couple things. We will be this Friday receiving proposals from those interested on the public safety building. So we'll have a pretty good idea of where we're heading there and what's happening. And I've asked Councilmember Swanson and John to put us in a position that if the bids come in appropriately, that we're prepared to issue the bond. I think we know that rates are sneaking up a little bit, so we want to be in a position, if the bids come in appropriately, that we're ready to move quickly in that regard. Also, John, I would like to, if the council is not opposed to this, I really think we need to start looking at some ordinances on setbacks from our waterways. We talked a little bit about, the wells, but the way developing's going and a lot of places are being developed we never thought would happen. I think it might be time to start looking at setback ordinances from our waterways. If the council's okay with that. All right. That's basically all that I have this evening. Staff, Joyce, do you have anything? John, do you have anything?
Yeah, just a few reminders. Fright Night is on the 30th at the Aquatic Center. That's the city-sponsored trunk or treat, or I shouldn't say city-sponsored. It's we have quite a few business partners in the community who sponsored or sponsor that. The election is coming. I know you're all aware of that. Ballots, I believe, are supposed to be mailed out today, so they should start hitting boxes soon. And then, let's see, we already talked about the fall cleanup, but just council, for your reminder, Dave or I will send you an email that includes the number for residents to text to get onto the leaf cleanup list. That's the only way we're doing leaf cleanup this year, so everybody needs to text that number to get it.
I wrote it down.
And then we will, each department is starting to put together presentations to bring to the council so we can kind of do a year in review. I just got a question for the council. Would you prefer to see those all together, or would you like to kind of do a focus on like one department a month and kind of see throughout the year?
Council, what's your preference? You want to be here till midnight some nights, or you want to spread it out?
Let's do midnight.
It's
Let's go to time.
Let's go to the tiebreaker on this with Councilmember Stoker.
As long as it's after January, I don't think.
Yeah, it's after January. I don't.
Well, and
yeah, I think, John, we'd like to spread them out.
Okay. Well, then we'll get that scheduled, and I think that'll help with some of these goals that we have on keeping the council and the public updated, is kind of using the same metrics moving forward. So we will bring back more information on that.
John, I believe you are publishing in the Connection each month activities of the council, relevant decisions, items that were addressed, so that the public's aware of that. Part of the extension.
Yeah, I try to give as much information, or I try to get it's designed to kind of be a little bit of a teaser. Here's what the topic is, and here's where you can get more information to help drive people to the city website. And then also with an emphasis on keeping it updated. So.
All right.
The website's got to be usable. Facebook pages.
Working on it. I think we were going to start tonight. Dave, you had what, about a 45-minute presentation on your goals for public works? All right. Council, one thing I would encourage you to be thinking about is Chair Day's planning is on us. We do have citizen involvement as we requested, but one of the things that we will need to approve is the route for the parade. So I think Tiffany will be bringing some recommendations to us that you need to be thinking about that, so that we can have an intelligent discussion when that hits us. So, all right, with that, I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Councilmember Stoker. And we have a second.
Second.
Okay, that's a non-debatable motion, so we'll adjourn.